In an alternate timeline where Darth Vader decisively kills Obi-Wan Kenobi in A New Hope, the course of the Star Wars saga changes drastically. Without Obi-Wan's self-sacrificial disappearance, the rebellion, Luke Skywalker, and even Darth Vader's own fate shift in unexpected ways. As Darth Vader's crimson blade struck deep into Obi-Wan Kenobi's side, the old Jedi Master collapsed to the floor of the Death Star. There was no disappearance. No vanishing into the Force. Only silence. Only the cold stillness of death. Luke Skywalker, hiding behind the hangar wall with Princess Leia, Chewbacca, and Han Solo, watched in stunned horror as Obi-Wan's lifeless body hit the ground. His scream was swallowed by the blaster fire and alarms. He had expected Obi-Wan to survive. He had believed in the strength of the Jedi. But now, everything had changed. Darth Vader stood still for a moment, staring down at his fallen former master. He had expected Obi-Wan to vanish, as legends told of Jedi who became one with the Force. But this time, there was nothing. Just the weight of the past, and a corpse at his feet. Vader turned slowly and marched toward the Millennium Falcon, but not before locking eyes with Luke. In that brief moment, something passed between them. A spark. A connection. Luke didn't know what it was, but Darth Vader did. The boy was strong with the Force, stronger than he had imagined. Back on the ship, Luke sat in silence, the image of Obi-Wan's death seared into his mind. He kept expecting to hear the old Jedi's voice, some kind of message, a final word of hope. But there was only silence. No ghost, no whisper, only the memory of pain and the burning need for answers. Without Obi-Wan's spiritual guidance, Luke would walk a harder path. He would have no voice to guide him to Yoda, no reassurance that he was the galaxy's last hope. The Force felt colder now, more distant, and within the shadows of space, Darth Vader began to wonder if the boy was truly his son, if destiny was coming full circle, and if, just maybe, Obi-Wan's death had opened a new future, one darker than anyone could imagine. Luke Skywalker's eyes widened as he looked through the open blast doors of the Death Star hangar. Obi-Wan Kenobi was face to face with Darth Vader. Their lightsabers clashed in a storm of red and blue, but something was wrong. Obi-Wan was slowing down. His movements, once calm and fluid, had become tired, heavy. Luke clutched his blaster tightly, his heart pounding in his chest. He wanted to run to him, to help him, but he couldn't move. Leia grabbed his arm and whispered, "We have to go." But Luke didn't move. Then it happened. Vader feinted to the left and then drove his crimson blade straight through Obi-Wan's body. The old Jedi Master let out a breath and collapsed. His robe didn't fall empty to the floor. His body didn't vanish. He just died. Luke's mouth dropped open in horror. "No!" he shouted, stepping forward instinctively. Blaster fire from stormtroopers brought him back to reality. Chewbacca growled and pulled him into the corridor. Han fired blindly as the group fled toward the Millennium Falcon. But Luke couldn't hear them, couldn't feel anything but shock. Obi-Wan was supposed to win. He was supposed to be a Jedi unstoppable, untouchable. But now, he was gone, and he had died like any other man. On board the Falcon, Luke sat alone in the gunner's seat. His hands were trembling. He stared at the stars, but only saw Vader's blade, only saw Obi-Wan falling. Leia tried to speak to him, but Luke didn't respond. He kept waiting to hear Obi-Wan's voice. Something comforting, a whisper through the Force. But there was nothing, only emptiness. He felt cold, more alone than he had ever felt in his life. The rebellion had won a small escape today, but Luke had lost everything. Obi-Wan was more than a Jedi. He was a link to the past, to his father, to something greater. Now, that link had been severed, and as the Falcon soared into hyperspace, Luke clenched his fists. A fire burned in his chest. He didn't want peace. He wanted revenge. He wanted answers. And he wanted Darth Vader to pay. As the Millennium Falcon lifted off from the Death Star hangar, Darth Vader stood motionless, his black cloak flowing behind him. His eyes hidden beneath the mask were locked on the escaping ship, not out of frustration, but because of what he had felt. The boy. The moment their eyes met, Vader had sensed something powerful, a presence he hadn't felt in many years. It was faint, but undeniable. The Force swirled around Luke Skywalker like a rising storm. Vader turned away from the hangar and began walking down the cold corridors of the Death Star. His mind was no longer on Obi-Wan Kenobi. The Jedi was dead. But something more dangerous had emerged. He reached the command deck, where Grand Moff Tarkin awaited him. No one questioned her, not because of her title, but because of her presence. Leia had become more than a princess, more than a survivor. She was a symbol, a leader born in fire. And in the dark days to come, it would be her courage, her strength, that kept the rebellion alive, even when all hope seemed lost. Alone in the quiet corners of the rebel base on Yavin 4, Luke Skywalker sat cross-legged with his eyes closed. He held the lightsaber that had once belonged to his father. The blue blade hummed faintly as he ignited it. The sound filled the empty room. But there was no voice to guide him, no mentor to correct his form. Obi-Wan Kenobi was gone, and Luke was left with only memories. He tried to remember the short lessons Obi-Wan had given him aboard the Millennium Falcon, the way he spoke of the Force, the way he moved. But Luke was guessing now, guessing how to breathe, how to focus, how to feel. The lightsaber was heavy in his hands. Awkward. It danced unevenly through the air. Still, he trained every night. Sweat poured down his face as he repeated the same moves over and over, blocking imaginary strikes, dodging enemies that weren't there, fighting ghosts. Leia watched him from a distance sometimes. She didn't interrupt. She knew this was something he needed, something he had to prove to himself. Without a Jedi Master, Luke relied on instincts. He meditated alone. He listened for the Force in silence. He practiced deflecting remote blasts. Sometimes he succeeded. Sometimes he failed. But he never gave up. He started building makeshift exercises with rebel equipment, balance drills, speed tests. He read every scrap of old data the rebellion had about Jedi history. Ancient records, legends, holos from before the Empire. But knowledge was not the same as wisdom. And without a teacher, Luke made mistakes. He pushed himself too hard, moved too fast. He got injured more than once. But pain became his lesson. Discipline became his ally. In that struggle, something began to awaken inside him. A strength that hadn't been there before. Not refined, not graceful, but real, raw, and powerful. The Force was with him, even if no one else was, even if he had to walk the path alone. Luke Skywalker wasn't just training. He was surviving and preparing for the day he would face Darth Vader again. Only this time, he wouldn't be afraid. The rebel base on Yavin 4 was alive with tension. Pilots ran to their fighters, not out of frustration, but because of what he had felt. The boy. The moment their eyes met, Vader had sensed something powerful, a presence he hadn't felt in many years. It was faint, but undeniable. The Force swirled around Luke Skywalker like a rising storm. Vader turned away from the hangar and began walking down the cold corridors of the Death Star. His mind was no longer on Obi-Wan Kenobi. The Jedi was dead. But something more dangerous had emerged. He reached the command deck, where Grand Moff Tarkin awaited him. Tarkin spoke about the tracking beacon, about the rebel base. But Vader barely listened. His thoughts were consumed by the boy. Who was he? Where had he come from? And why did he feel familiar? Later, alone in his meditation chamber, Vader reached out through the Force. He searched for the boy's presence, and he found it. Bright, untamed, full of fear and fury. But underneath it, all hope. Vader sat in silence, disturbed. He had felt this presence before. Years ago, in another life. It was like Anakin Skywalker had been reborn. And yet, Vader knew Anakin was dead. Still, the Force did not lie. This boy was no ordinary rebel. He was strong. Too strong. The Emperor needed to know. But Vader hesitated. For the first time in years, he felt uncertain. Not weak. Not conflicted. Just curious. Could this boy be turned? Trained? Could he become something more? Darth Vader clenched his fists. He would find him again. And next time, he would not let him escape. Luke Skywalker was the key. The key to ending the Jedi. The key to reshaping the galaxy. And maybe, just maybe, the key to Darth Vader's own redemption, or his final descent into darkness. Inside the cramped hold of the Millennium Falcon, the silence was heavy. Luke Skywalker sat apart from the others, his eyes lost in thought. Grief surrounded him like a shadow. But amid the sorrow, Princess Leia Organa remained focused. She had seen death before. She had endured the destruction of Alderaan. Now, with Obi-Wan Kenobi gone, someone had to lead. Someone had to be strong. Leia stood at the ship's center, scanning the star map projected from R2-D2. Han Solo leaned back in the pilot's seat, watching her. Even he could sense the shift. Leia's presence had changed. It was sharper, more commanding. She turned to Chewbacca and gave instructions for their next rendezvous point. Luke closed his eyes for just a second. Then he shut off his targeting computer. Leia's voice crackled in his headset, confused. But Luke was calm, focused. He reached out with the Force, felt the path, and fired. 2 torpedoes launched into the shaft. A heartbeat passed. Then the Death Star erupted in a wave of light and fire. The rebels cheered. Yavin 4 was safe. The Empire had been dealt a massive blow, but the cost had been high. Luke flew back in silence. He had saved the day. But it didn't feel like a victory. Not yet. Because Darth Vader was still alive. And Luke knew the true battle had only just begun. The hulls of the Death Star wreckage still echoed in Darth Vader's memory. The explosion hadn't just destroyed a weapon. It had exposed a truth. A pilot strong in the Force had been the one to deliver the final shot. And Vader had felt it. The presence. It had been powerful. Familiar. Unrefined, but undeniable. Darth Vader stood alone in his meditation chamber aboard the Executor. His mechanical breath echoed against the metal walls. He reviewed every detail from the battle. The movements, the Force signature, and the name whispered through Imperial reports. Luke Skywalker. The name struck Vader like a jolt. Skywalker. It couldn't be a coincidence. The Force had led him to this boy. There was something there. something that reminded him of himself, his strength, his passion, his rage. Vader became consumed by the thought. He ordered every Imperial officer to track down information on the boy. No detail was too small. No lead was ignored. He wanted to know where Luke came from, who trained him, how he had learned to use the Force without a Jedi master. Vader grew restless. He meditated more often, trying to reach through the Force, trying to feel Luke again. But the boy was distant, untrained. Vader wanted him found, not to destroy him, but to mold him, to turn him, to make him an apprentice, a son. The Emperor noticed the shift. He warned Vader to stay focused on the rebellion. But Vader's mind was elsewhere. Every rebel battle, every skirmish. Vader searched for signs of the boy. He began interrogating prisoners himself. He demanded answers. Where was Luke? Who was hiding him? Vader's obsession deepened. He saw flashes in his visions. A young man holding a blue lightsaber, fighting bravely, standing tall. He heard whispers of destiny, of betrayal, of legacy. Luke Skywalker had become more than a name. He had become a fixation, a key to something Vader could not yet explain. But he knew one thing for certain. He would find the boy, no matter how far he had to go, no matter how many stood in his way. The hunt had begun, and Vader would not stop. Inside the cold, shadowed throne room of the Imperial Palace, Emperor Palpatine sat in silence. His yellow eyes peered out across the galaxy through the Force. He had felt the disturbance. He had seen the destruction of the Death Star, and he had sensed something deeper within Darth Vader. Something dangerous. Something emotional. The boy Luke Skywalker had touched a part of Vader that Palpatine thought was long buried. A spark of Anakin Skywalker still lingered, and that could not be allowed. The Emperor summoned Darth Vader to his chamber. Vader knelt before him, silent, waiting. Palpatine's voice was calm but sharp. "You seem distracted, Lord Vader." Vader said nothing, but Palpatine already knew the truth. He probed Vader's mind. He felt the obsession, the anger, the curiosity. Luke Skywalker had become a crack in Vader's armor, and the Emperor moved quickly to take advantage. He began tightening his control. He assigned Vader to more brutal campaigns. He sent him into endless conflict. No time for thought. No time for memories. Only war. Only destruction. Palpatine replaced moments of reflection with pain and duty. He began to speak to Vader more often through the Force. His presence was constant. Watching. Whispering. Controlling. He reminded Vader of his past. Of his failures. Of Padme. Of Mustafar. Of how the Jedi had betrayed him. He twisted the pain into power. Vader obeyed, but inside, the conflict grew. Palpatine sensed it. So he made Vader prove himself again and again. Crush rebellions. Punish officers. Eliminate any trace of mercy. The Emperor even hinted that Luke Skywalker might be turned. Together, he said, you and I could shape the boy. But it was a lie. He wanted control over Luke for himself, to replace Vader, to rule without weakness. Vader knew it, but he stayed silent, bound by chains of guilt and fear. Palpatine's grip tightened. Every mission, every command. Vader was no longer just an apprentice. He was a weapon, sharpened, directed, controlled. But the fire inside him had not gone out, and the Emperor, in his arrogance, believed it never would. Her voice didn't shake. Her mind was clear. She knew the rebellion couldn't afford to lose momentum. Not now. Not after what happened on the Death Star. She approached Luke gently. He didn't look at her. His eyes were full of pain. Leia sat beside him. "I know what he meant to you," she said softly. Luke didn't speak. "I lost my family too," Leia added. "My world. Everyone I loved. I know how much it hurts." Luke finally looked up, and in his eyes, Leia saw something. Something fragile, but something strong too. She put a hand on his shoulder. "We still have a fight ahead," she said. "We need you." Leia stood again and turned back to the others. There was no ceremony, no speech, only action. When they arrived at the rebel base on Yavin 4, Leia stepped off the Falcon like a general returning from war. The pilot saluted her. The command staff looked to her for guidance, and she gave it, clearly, decisively. No one questioned her, not because of her title, but because of her presence. Leia had become more than a princess, more than a survivor. She was a symbol, a leader, born in fire. And in the dark days to come, it would be her courage, her strength, that kept the rebellion alive, even when all hope seemed lost. Alone in the quiet corners of the rebel base on Yavin 4, Luke Skywalker sat cross-legged with his eyes closed. He held the lightsaber that had once belonged to his father. The blue blade hummed faintly as he ignited it. The sound filled the empty room, but there was no voice to guide him, no mentor to correct his form. Obi-Wan Kenobi was gone, and Luke was left with only memories. He tried to remember the short lessons Obi-Wan had given him aboard the Millennium Falcon, the way he spoke of the Force, the way he moved. But Luke was guessing now, guessing how to breathe, how to focus, how to feel. The lightsaber was heavy in his hands. Awkward. It danced unevenly through the air. Still, he trained every night. Sweat poured down his face as he repeated the same moves over and over, blocking imaginary strikes, dodging enemies that weren't there, fighting ghosts. Leia watched him from a distance sometimes. She didn't interrupt. She knew this was something he needed, something he had to prove to himself. Without a Jedi master, Luke relied on instincts. He meditated alone. He listened for the Force in silence. He practiced deflecting remote blasts. Sometimes he succeeded. Sometimes he failed. But he never gave up. He started building makeshift exercises with rebel equipment, balance drills, speed tests. He read every scrap of old data the rebellion had about Jedi history. Ancient records, legends, holos from before the Empire. But knowledge was not the same as wisdom. And without a teacher, Luke made mistakes. He pushed himself too hard, moved too fast. He got injured more than once. But pain became his lesson. Discipline became his ally. In that struggle, something began to awaken inside him. A strength that hadn't been there before. Not refined, not graceful, but real, raw, and powerful. The Force was with him, even if no one else was. Even if he had to walk the path alone. Luke Skywalker wasn't just training. He was surviving, and preparing for the day he would face Darth Vader again. Only this time, he wouldn't be afraid. The rebel base on Yavin 4 was alive with tension. Pilots ran to their fighters. Mechanics shouted over engines. The Death Star was approaching, and time was running out. Luke Skywalker stood by his X-Wing, fastening his flight suit. His hands trembled slightly, but his eyes were focused. Obi-Wan Kenobi was gone. There would be no Jedi guidance today. But Luke wasn't the same farm boy who left Tatooine. He had changed. He had trained. And he was ready. Princess Leia gave the final briefing. Her voice was firm, her words clear. She reminded them what was at stake. Freedom. Survival. Hope. The pilots launched into space. X-Wings and Y-Wings formed tight formations, heading straight for the Death Star trench. The Empire was waiting. TIE fighters screamed through the stars, attacking with ruthless precision. One by one, rebel ships were hit. Explosions lit up the darkness. But Luke stayed steady. He followed Biggs and Wedge, diving into the trench at full speed. The walls closed in around them. Laser fire rained down from above. Behind them, Darth Vader entered the battle. He didn't hesitate. He destroyed pilot after pilot, sensing the Force guiding him. And then, he found Luke. As Luke neared the exhaust port, Vader moved into position behind him. But something strange happened. Luke heard a voice. Faint. Distant. But real. Use the Force, Luke. It was Obi-Wan. Not as a ghost, but as an echo. A memory burned into the Force itself. The destruction of the Death Star had been a victory, but it didn't feel like one anymore. Obi-Wan Kenobi was gone. There was no one to guide him, no Jedi to teach him what came next. Only silence and questions. Why had Obi-Wan not warned him? Why had he been left to figure out the Force alone? The weight of the galaxy pressed heavily on his shoulders. He felt lost, alone, angry. Each mission with the rebellion brought more death, more sacrifices. And slowly, frustration began to replace hope. Leia tried to encourage him. Han Solo joked to lighten the mood. But Luke's heart grew heavier, his thoughts darker. The Force stirred inside him, powerful but wild. And without training, he struggled to control it. He began hearing echoes in his mind, whispers that called to him during battle, feelings that pushed him to act without thinking. Strike faster, hit harder, show no mercy. And he listened. He started using the Force more aggressively. He lashed out at enemies in ways that frightened even himself. But part of him liked it. The power, the certainty, the sense of control. It was seductive. One night, while meditating alone, he felt a presence. Cold, strong. Darth Vader. Their minds brushed for only a moment, but it was enough. Luke gasped. And deep down, something resonated. He didn't just feel fear. He felt curiosity, a strange connection. And Vader felt it too. He began reaching out through the Force, whispering through Luke's dreams. Your friends do not understand you. They fear your power. You are meant for something greater. Luke tried to resist, but the voice kept returning, promising answers, promising purpose. And with every battle lost, every friend wounded, that promise became more tempting. Leia noticed the change. So did Han. But neither could pull Luke back. He was slipping, slowly, quietly. And if no one stopped him, the boy who destroyed the Death Star might become the one who destroyed everything else. The rebel base was no longer a place of hope. It had become a bunker of whispers, tension, and tired eyes. Since the loss of Obi-Wan Kenobi, everything had changed. Morale was fading. The rebellion had won a battle by destroying the Death Star. But now, the Empire's wrath was greater than ever. Darth Vader had unleashed a brutal hunt. He led every strike with terrifying precision. Rebel outposts across the galaxy fell one by one. No system was safe. No planet untouched. The rebels were always running, always hiding, Fuel grew scarce. Ships needed repairs. Every new recruit was met with fear. Were they a spy? The Alliance leadership tried to remain strong. Monday, Mothma held meetings in secret. General Dodonna issued commands with calm urgency. But even they were losing faith. Leia Organa bore the weight silently. She worked harder than anyone. She gave speeches. She led missions. She made hard choices. But inside, she missed Obi-Wan. She missed the wisdom that held the rebellion together. And she could see the toll it was taking on Luke Skywalker. He was growing distant, harder, less patient. Leia didn't know how to reach him. And Han Solo, despite his growing loyalty, wasn't a Jedi. He couldn't guide Luke. No one could. The rebellion's victories were becoming smaller. They would sabotage a fuel line only to lose 2 ships in the escape. They'd intercept Imperial codes only to find they were traps. Every step forward cost lives. Vader seemed unstoppable. The Emperor's control spread through the galaxy like a shadow. Even neutral systems now feared speaking with the rebels. Funding dried up. Allies turned away. The spark of rebellion had not gone out, but it flickered in the wind. The leadership began to ask difficult questions. How long could they keep going? Could they win? Would Luke remain with them? Or would they lose him too? The rebellion faced not just the Empire, but the fear of collapse, the fear of becoming nothing more than a memory, a whisper against the roar of the dark side. And the struggle had only just begun.